Looks like my time is up.
What?
Damn, Skippy. And it looks like I'm gonna have to clean your clock. Never! Hello and welcome back to Gamebox, show we take a look at games of yesteryear. And today we'll be taking a look at a game from the PlayStation 2 era, a game that is a sequel to my last video, a game that is seen as a black sheep in the Sands of Time trilogy, a little game called Prince of Persia: Warrior Within. Developed by Ubisoft Montreal and published by Ubisoft, during the summer of 2004, a rumor started circulating that Ubisoft was working on a sequel to The Sands of Time. The rumors were confirmed on March 4, 2004 during the DICE Summit in Las Vegas, when Ubisoft came out and stated that a new Prince of Persia game was in the works. A trailer was shown at E3 2004 along with some gameplay. It was stated that the new game would have a darker tone from The Sands of Time, and this was very true. Gone were the bright colors, being replaced with darker ones, and
You bitch!
as well as adding other things. This change didn't end up sitting well with fans of the first game, even with Jordan Mechner, the original creator of the series. During the development of Warrior Within, Mechner wasn't involved with the new game as he was busy with the Sands of Time film adaptation. Jordan Mechner stated, "I'm not a fan of the artistic direction or violence that earned it the M rating. The story, character, dialogue, voice acting, and visual style were not to my taste." So, suffice it to say, he was not a fan. Development was handled by a majority of the original team behind Sands of Time, minus the creative director, Patrice, who wanted to take the series in another direction, having players take control of bodyguards that would be tasked with protecting the young prince. The new game would have been called Prince of Persia: Assassin, which would later form the groundwork for a little-known series called Assassin's Creed. I don't know, maybe you heard of it. Jean-Christophe was named creative director for Warrior Within. The development team not only wanted to change the style, but also wanted to rework the combat, which now featured the freeform fighting system. Try saying that 5 times fast. A system that added a variety of moves for the prince to perform. The voice work was changed as well. In Sands of Time, the prince was voiced by Yuri Lowenthal.
That was not my father.
This time around, the prince was voiced by Robin Atkin Downes,
You bitch!
who has had various roles in the industry, including
God damn it!
What took you so long?
Reyes is right. We don't have the funds to piss about. It's now or never.
But don't feel too bad for Yuri. He would end up doing pretty well if I do say so myself. But we are far from that one. They even got Monica Bellucci added to the cast, which is pretty impressive. Warrior Within was released on PlayStation 2, Xbox, GameCube, and Windows on November 30th, 2004 in North America, December 3rd, 2004 in Europe for Xbox and GameCube, and December 4th for PlayStation in Europe, and October 13th, 2005 in Japan for PlayStation and Xbox, with no release on GameCube. It was also released on PlayStation Portable on December 6th, 2005. It was re-released on PlayStation 3 on April 19th, 2010 for North America and December 16th, 2010 in Europe, as well as on iPad on June 2nd, 2010 and iPhone December 21st, 2010. Reception for Warrior Within was actually pretty good. Well, at least for the console versions. Not so much for the handheld ports. And with that, let's take a look at today's game. Set 7 years after the events of Sands of Time. During these 7 years, the prince has been hunted by the Dahaka, an invincible creature who is the guardian of the timeline. This was a direct result from the prince releasing the Sands of Time from the events of the first game, and now the prince is cursed to die. And the Dahaka is the one who's cashing in that IOU, so the prince forms a plan. He sets out to visit a place called the Island of Time, the birthplace of the Sands. The prince aims to prevent the Sands from ever being made. However, this trip isn't exactly perilous. There are forces at work that want nothing more than to see him fail. Warrior Within's gameplay remained the same when it came to platforming, keeping the fluid parkour system. However, the development team did retool some things about Warrior Within. As stated before, they had a reworked combat system, the Free Flow Combat System, a new system that gave the prince more options when it came to combat. No longer was a player limited to simply using the patented Vault and Slash move of Sands of Time. The combat was made to be faster and more expansive. The prince can now perform grabs, counters, wall vaults, enemy vaults, disarms, and even dual-wield swords. So the options were there. In fact, it was kind of the main focus for the development team. But new combat wasn't the only additions. The Dehaka will chase the prince at certain points of the game. If he catches him, it's game over. The prince's abilities have changed this time around as well, kind of. He still has Revival, this time being called Recall. This functions the same. There is Eye of the Storm. This is your slowdown. This one has the same effect as Delay from Sands of Time. However, unlike Delay, Eye of the Storm slows down enemies while still keeping the prince's speed relatively normal, which I found myself using way more in this game than in Sands of Time. There is Breath of Fate. This is a strong ground attack that knocks enemies back. There is Wind of Fate, a stronger ground attack, and then there's Cyclone of Fate, which is an even stronger ground attack. However, the player can't use these bad boys all willy-nilly. These attacks can be interrupted. And finally, there's Ravages of Time. This functions as this game's version of Haste. This allows Prince to zip around and attack with lightning speed. This move can be very useful in tough boss fights. The Prince is not a one-sword kind of man anymore. This joke will make sense later. He has more main swords he can obtain through the game. There are 6, 7 if you do some extra steps for it, which we will get into later. There is the Eagle Sword, Wooden Stick, and Spider Sword. These are your basic swords. Then there's the Serpent Sword, which acts as a key for one tiny part, then goes back cutting up foos. There is the Lion Sword. This sword gives the prince a charge-up attack. The Scorpion Sword. This sword is able to break weakened walls. And finally, the Water Sword. This sword can only be gained if the prince heads out and visits all the health upgrades. Now, 2 things about this. 1. If you want to get this sword, you need to commit. If you miss one of the health upgrades before the final boss fight, you lock yourself out of getting this sword. I did this on my PlayStation 3 run when I missed the health upgrade in prison, but I was able to get all the upgrades on my PlayStation 2 run. The second thing is, this sword is tied to the alternate ending of the game, which also happens to be the ending that's considered canon. So yeah, that's a thing. The prince can now use secondary weapons. These can either be taken off enemies or picked up from the many weapon racks sprinkled around the game. This allows the prince to dual wield weapons and open up the combat even more. The prince can now throw any weapon he picks up, which is very useful if the player needs some breathing room. There are actually some secret weapons the prince can find. There is the Teddy Bear, Flamingo, Hockey Stick, and Light Sword, which I found none of, but I did find the Rayman Glove, and let me tell you, you have not lived until you killed a giant while wearing an oversized white glove. Warrior Within takes place in one location, that being the Island of Time, and like the Palace of Azad, the island does have different locations the prince will have to visit. But unlike Azad, there's actually backtracking, so the player is going to get very familiar with different sections of the island. This is double the backtracking time by the use of time portals. This allows the prince to hop between 2 time periods in order to accomplish different goals, which usually culminates in the prince finding a new area in the present, then finding a time portal, and seeing the same area again in the past, which happened to be one of the complaints of the game. In order to access some areas, the prince will need to be in certain time periods. The other benefit of finding time portals is that each new portal unlocks new powers and sand tanks for the prince. This time around there are more bosses, and they're 50-50 as far as difficulty goes. I'm actually only going to show 3 of them, as the others are a bit spoilerish. Some of them did utilize the counter move, which I found was easier to perform than in Sands of Time. Once again, I'm using my footage for my PlayStation 3 run, but if I were to recommend a version to play, I would say go with the PlayStation 2 version. I did encounter several glitches on the PlayStation 3 version, one of which was when after a boss fight, a ladder that was supposed to come down disappeared after a short cutscene, forcing me to reload the previous save. One of the other things I took notice of was that the life bar for the bosses was off center. It was minor, but it just bugged the hell out of me. The color palette was changed as well. Gone are the vibrant colors of Azad, swapped out for a more washed out look. It did sometimes blend in together. The music had some tweaks as well, focused on the use of electric guitar, which didn't sound too bad. The only strange piece of music that was used was the instrumental version of I Stand Alone during the Dehaka chase scenes, which sometimes didn't trigger in the PlayStation 3 version. Oh, also the use of Straight Outta Line in the end credits. Maybe it's because I heard these songs before, but I don't know, it just felt weird to me. But other than that, I actually liked the music and the overall look of the game. So, all in all, is this a game you need to go out and play? I'm gonna give a soft yes. This is due to this being the second game in a trilogy, and the ending of this game does lead into the next one, though some elements are different. If I did have to recommend a version, I would say the PlayStation 2 version is the way to go, due to having less bugs. No bugs actually, or at least for me it did. The combat works fine, but the encounters ended up boiling down to button mashing or sticking to one combo for the entire game. Some of the powers were more useful than others, while others I did not use at all, but it worked. Some of the enemy types did come off as more annoying than challenging. Some of them I had to run past just so I didn't have to deal with them, which was nice to be able to do. The backtracking didn't bother me that much, as I had played the game several times in the past. However, I can see this being bothersome for those who will be picking it up for the first time. I did miss the color of Sands of Time, but this is a product of its time. Prince is not the first video game character to get a darker revamp.
Say something! Just this once! I'm gonna kill Praxis!
And that's not entirely a bad thing. I did dig the new tone in music, but it does feel like I'm one of the very few that share that opinion. So all in all, it was a fun game to go back through, despite the bugs. But it does have to deal with living in the shadow that is the Sands of Time, which is unfortunate. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to warm my pass off while eating some gas station sushi. Hey, welcome to the end of the video. I thank you for making it this far. We are nearly done with the original trilogy. The next game we'll be taking a look at is Prince of Persia: The Two Thrones, the final game in the series. Well, not exactly, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But until then, you know what to do. Spread the awesome, and I'll see you next time.